Shalom, my friends from here in Jerusalem. It's time for this month's Ask Yael, and once again, thank you for your wonderful questions. I'm going to answer a question from Ethel Bratberg, who wants to know, she's learning in the Old Testament all about the different animal sacrifices that had to be brought to the temple, sometimes for Thanksgiving, sometimes for sins, sometimes just for morning and afternoon and evening offerings. For all different situations, we learn about the different offerings that were brought to the temple. And so she wanted to know, today in Israel, do Jewish people bring animal sacrifices? And if not, is there something that happens in its place? It's a wonderful question, and the answer is no. When the temple was destroyed, the sacrifices stopped. Sacrifices weren't something that they just brought to the temple and put on the altar and did themselves. It was something that they saw God's revealed glory within the sacrifices. He would light the fire. He would bring the burnt offering, reach nichoach l'Hashem. It was a beautiful smell up into the Lord, that we saw God's revelation when we brought the sacrifices, and we knew, were our prayers received or were they not? Was the sacrifice correct or was it not? And it was only specific people. Even everyone was able to bring a sacrifice to the temple, but it was only the priest who actually put the sacrifice on the altar and had very intricate details of how he brought this offering up to God. And so when the temple was destroyed, the sacrifices stopped. But what we have in its stead now is prayer. We learn from our sages that in place of the sacrifice, our sages instituted prayer. And so in Judaism, you have the regular morning, afternoon, and evening prayer. This corresponds to the sacrifices that were brought in the temple, and it also corresponds to the three forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That everything is very interconnected when it comes to tradition, when it comes to our actions of faith. Everything is connected, and everything comes from our past. We live today in the vision of our forefathers, that we can't move forward if we don't look backwards. And so our prayer today connects us to our forefathers, connects us to the temple sacrifices. And so through prayer, we're able to ask for forgiveness, to say thanksgiving up to God. There's special prayers for after you give birth. There's special prayers even for when you hear bad news. If you hear that somebody died, there's a prayer for that you say, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Blessed is the King who is true. That God makes these decisions for good and for bad, and we have to accept them as God's will. And so instead of bringing a sacrifice like we would have in times in the past, for times of Thanksgiving, for times of when we did sin, for times of celebration, for times of holiday, there are prayers, special prayers that we say for every single situation. And so I hope this answers your question. I hope I explained it to your liking. And I want to encourage you now, because you live in America or Brazil or Korea, it doesn't matter where you are, you don't have to be in Jerusalem to bring the sacrifice like you had to do during the times of the temple. Open up your mouth in prayer, lift up your heart to God, and that is your sacrifice. So remember, for every situation in your life, for good, for bad, for happy, for sad, for thanksgiving, for anger, for happy times, for times of loss, lift your voice up to God. That's your sacrifice, and I know it will be received. God bless you from here in Jerusalem.